Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Puck of Pook's Hill by Rudyard Kipling. The children are listening to the reminiscences of Sir Richard Dalingbrook, who is telling them of the decisions of his lord d'Aquila, who was betrayed to King Henry II by one Lord Fulke, who told King Henry that d'Aquila was a traitor. D'Aquila is no traitor. D'Aquila will not go to war with Henry because he is busy keeping England from being invaded. We are waiting to see how d'Aquila will cope with Lord Fulke. "Be still," said d'Aquila. "I think for England." So we waited what our Lord of Pevensey should devise, and the sweat ran down Fulke's forehead. At last said d'Aquila, "I am too old to judge or to trust any man. I do not covet thy lands as thou hast coveted mine, and whether thou art any better or any worse than any other black Angevin thief, it is for thy king to find out. Therefore, go back to thy king, Fulke." "And wilt say nothing of what is past?" said Fulke. "Why should I? Thy son will stay with me. If the king calls me again to leave Pevensey, which I must guard against England's enemies, if the king sends his men against me for a traitor, or if I hear that the king in his bed thinks any evil of me or my 2 knights, thy son will be hanged from out this window, Fulke." "But it hadn't anything to do with his son," cried Una, startled. "How could we have hanged Fulke?" said Sir Richard. "We needed him to make our peace with the king. He would have betrayed half England for the boy's sake. Of that we were sure." "I don't understand," said Una, "but I think it was simply awful." "So did not Fulke. He was well pleased." "What, because his son was going to be killed?" "Nay, because d'Aquila had shown him how he might save the boy's life and his own lands and honors. 'I will do it,' he said. 'I swear I will do it. I will tell the king thou art no traitor, but the most excellent, valiant, and perfect of us all. Yes, I will save thee.'" D'Aquila looked still into the bottom of the cup, rolling the wine dregs to and fro. "Aye," he said, "if I had a son, I would, I think, save him. But do not by any means tell me how thou wilt go about it." "Nay, nay," said Fulke, nodding his bald head wisely, "that is my secret. But rest at ease, d'Aquila, no hair of thy head nor root of thy land shall be forfeited." And he smiled like one planning great good deeds. "And henceforth," said d'Aquila, "I counsel thee to serve one master, not 2. "What?" said Fulke. "Can I work no more honest trading between the 2 sides these troublous times?" "Serve Robert or the king, England or Normandy," said d'Aquila. "I care not which it is, but make thy choice here and now." "The king, then," said Fulke, "for I see he is better served than Robert. Shall I swear it?" "No need," said d'Aquila, and he laid his hand on the parchments which Gilbert had written. "It shall be some part of my Gilbert's penance to copy out the savory tale of thy life, till we have made 10, 20, and 100 maybe copies. How many cattle, think you, would the Bishop of Tours give for that tale, or thy brother, or the monks of Blois? Minstrels shall turn it into songs which thy own Saxon serfs shall sing behind their plough-stilts, and men-at-arms ride through thy Norman towns. From here to Rome, Fulke, men will make very merry over that tale, how Fulke told it, hanging in a well like a drowned puppy. This shall be thy punishment if ever I find thee double-dealing with thy king any more. Meantime, the parchments stay here with thy son. Him I will return to thee when thou hast made my peace with the king. The parchments, never." Fulke hid his face and groaned. "Bones of the saints," d'Aquila laughed. "The pen cuts deep. I could never have fetched that grunt out of thee with any sword." "But so long as I do not anger thee, my tale will be secret," said Fulke. "Just so long. "Does that comfort thee, Fulke?" said de Aquila. "What other comfort have you left me?" he said, and a sudden sweat wept hopelessly like a child, dropping his face on his knees. "Poor Fulke," said Una. "I pitied him also," said Sir Richard. "After the spur, corn," said de Aquila, and threw Fulke 3 wedges of gold he had taken from our little chest by the bed-place. "If I had known this," said Fulke, catching his breath, "I would never have lifted hand against Pevensey. Only lack of this yellow stuff has made me so unlucky in my dealings." It was dawn then, and they stirred in the great hall below. We sent down Fulke's mail to be scoured, and when he rode away at noon under his own and the king's banner, very splendid and stately did he show. He smoothed his long beard and called his son to his stirrup and kissed him. De Aquila rode with him as far as the New Mill landward. We thought the night had been all a dream. "But did he make it right with the king?" Dan asked. "About your not being traitors, I mean?" Sir Richard smiled. "The king sent no second summons to Pevensey, nor did he ask why de Aquila had not obeyed the first. Yes, that was Fulke's work. I know not how he did it, but it was well and swiftly done." "Then you didn't do anything to his son?" said Una. "The boy? Oh, he was an imp. He turned the keep doors out of dortoir when we had him. He sang foul songs learned in the barons' camps. Poor fool. He set the hounds fighting in the hall. He lit the rushes to drive out, as he said, the fleas. He drew his dagger on Jehan, who threw him down the stairway for it, and he rode his horse through the crops and among sheep. But when we had beaten him and showed him wolf and deer, he followed us old men like a young eager hound and called us uncle. His father came to the summer's end to take him away, but the boy had no lust to go because of the otter hunting, and he stayed on till the fox hunting. I gave him a bittern's claw to bring him good luck at shooting. An imp if there ever was." "And what happened to Gilbert?" said Dan. "Not even a whipping. De Aquila said he would sooner a clerk, however false, that knew the manor roll, than a fool, however true, that must be taught his work afresh. Moreover, after that night, I think Gilbert loved us as much as he feared de Aquila. At least he would not leave us, not even when Vivian, the king's clerk, would have made him the sacristan of Battle Abbey. A false fellow, but in his fashion, bold." "Did Robert ever land in Pevensey after all?" Dan went on. "We guarded the coast too well while Henry was fighting his barons. And 3 or 4 years later, when England had peace, Henry crossed to Normandy and showed his brother some work at Tenneckray that cured Robert of fighting. Many of Henry's men sailed from Pevensey to that war. Fulke came, I remember, and we all 4 lay in the little chamber once again and drank together. De Aquila was right. One should not judge men. Fulke was merry. Yes, always merry, with a catch in his breath." "And what did you do afterwards?" said Una. "We talked together of past times. That is all men can do when they grow old, little maid." The bell for tea rang faintly across the meadows. Dan lay in the bows of the Golden Hind, Una in the stern, the book of verses open in her lap. She was reading from The Slave's Dream. Again in the mist and shadow of sleep he saw his native land. "I don't know when you began that," said Dan sleepily. On the middle thwart of the boat, beside Una's sunbonnet, lay an oak leaf, an ash leaf, and a thorn leaf that must have dropped down from the trees above. And the brook giggled as though it had just seen some joke. The runes on Welland's sword. "A smith makes me to betray my man in his first fight. To gather gold at the world's end I am sent. The gold I gather comes into England out of deep water. Like a shining fish, then it descends into deep water. It is not given for goods or gear, but for the thing. The gold I gather a king covets for an ill use. The gold I gather is drawn up out of deep water. Like a shining fish, then it descends into deep water. It is not given for goods or gear, but for the thing. A centurion of the 30th. Cities and thrones and powers. Cities and thrones and powers stand in time's eye almost as long as flowers which daily die. But as new buds put forth to glad new men, out of the spent and unconsidered earth, the cities rise again. This season's daffodil, she never hears what change, what chance, what chill cut down last year's, but with bold countenance and knowledge small, esteems her 7 days' continuance to be perpetual. So time that is o'erkind to all that be, ordains us even as blind, as bold as she, that in our very death and burial sure, shadow to shadow well persuadeth, saith, see how our works endure. Dan had come to grief over his Latin and was kept in, so Una went alone to Farwood. Dan's big catapult and the lead bullets that Hobden had made for him were hidden in an old hollow beech stub on the west of the wood. They had named the place out of the verse in Lays of Ancient Rome. From lordly Volaterrae, where scowls the far-famed hold, piled by hands of giants were godlike kings of old. They were the godlike kings, and when old Hobden piled some comfortable brushwood between the big wooden knees of Volaterrae, they called him Hands of Giants. Una slipped through their private gap in the fence and sat still a while, scowling as scowlily and lordly as she knew how. For Volaterrae is an important watchtower that juts out of Farwood, just as Farwood juts out of the hillside. Pook's Hill lay below her, and all the turns of the brook as it wanders out of the Willingford woods between hop gardens to old Hobden's cottage at the forge. The sou'west wind, there's always wind by Volaterrae, blew from the bare ridge where Cherry Clack windmill stands. Now the wind prowling through the woods sounded like exciting things going to happen, and that is why on blowy days you stand up in Volaterrae and shout bits of the lays to suit its noises. Una took Dan's catapult from its secret place and made ready to meet Lars Porsena's army stealing through the wind-whitened aspens by the brook. A gust boomed up the valley, and Una chanted sorrowfully, Verbena down to Ostia hath wasted all the plain, Astur hath stormed Janiculum, and the stout guards are slain. But the wind, not charging fair to the wood, started aside and shook a single oak in Gleason's pasture. Here it made itself all small and crouched among the grasses, waving the tips of them as a cat waves the tip of her tail before she springs. Now welcome, welcome, Sextus, sang Una, loading the catapult. Now welcome to thy home. Why dost thou stay and turn away? Here lies the road to Rome. She fired into the face of the lull to wake up the cowardly wind, and heard a grunt from behind a thorn in the pasture. Oh, my Winky, she said aloud, and that was something she'd picked up from Dan. I believe I've tickled up a Gleason cow. You painted little beast, a voice cried. I'll teach you to sling your masters. She looked down most cautiously and saw a young man covered with hoopy bronze armor, all glowing among the late broom. But what Una admired beyond all was his great bronze helmet with a red horsetail that flicked in the wind. She could hear the long hairs rasp on his shimmery shoulder plates. What does the faun mean, he said, half aloud to himself, by telling me the painted people have changed? He caught sight of Una's yellow head. Have you seen a painted lead slinger? He called. No, said Una, but if you've seen a bullet... Seen, cried the man. It passed within a hair's breadth of my ear. Well, that was me. I'm most awfully sorry. Didn't the faun tell you I was coming? He smiled. Not if you mean Puck. I thought you were a Gleason cow. I didn't know you were a... What are you? He laughed outright, showing a set of splendid teeth. His face and his eyes were dark, and his eyebrows met above his big nose in one bushy black bar. They call me Parsenius. I've been a centurion of the 7th cohort of the 30th Legion, in Ulpia Victrix. Did you sling that bullet? I did. I was using Dan's catapult, said Una. Catapults, said he. I ought to know something about them. Show me. He leaped the rough fence with a rattle of spear, shield, and armor, and hoisted himself into Volaterrae as quickly as a shadow. "A sling on a forked stick, I understand," he cried, and pulled at the elastic. "But what wonderful beast yields this stretching leather?" "It's elastic. You put the bullet into that hoop, and then you pull hard." The man pulled and hit himself square on his thumbnail. "Each man to his own weapon," he said gravely, handing it back. "I am better with the bigger machine, little maiden, but it's a pretty toy. A wolf would laugh at it. Aren't you afraid of wolves?" "There aren't any," said Una. "Never believe it. A wolf's like a winged hat. He comes when he isn't expected. Don't they hunt wolves here?" "We don't hunt," said Una, remembering what she had heard from grown-ups. "We preserve pheasants. Do you know them?" "I ought to," said the young man, smiling again, and he imitated the cry of a cock pheasant so perfectly that a bird answered out of the wood. "What a big, painted, clucking fool is a peasant," he said, "just like some Romans." "But you're a Roman yourself, aren't you?" said Una. "Yes and no. I'm one of a good few thousand who have never seen Rome except in a picture. My people have lived at Vectis for centuries. Vectis, that island west yonder that you can see so far in clear weather." "You mean the Isle of Wight? It lifts up just before rain, and you see it from the downs." "Very likely. Our villa's on the south edge of the island by the broken cliffs. Most of it is 300 years old, but the cow stables, where our first ancestors lived, must be 100 years older. Oh, quite that, because the founder of our family had his land given him by Agricola at the settlement. It's not a bad little place for its size. In springtime, violets grow down to the very beach. I've gathered seaweeds for myself and violets for my mother many a time with our old nurse." "Was your nurse a Romaness too?" "No, a Numidian. Gods be good to her. A dear, fat, brown thing with a tongue like a cowbell. She was a free woman. By the way, are you free, maiden?" "Oh, quite," said Una, "at least till tea time, and in summer our governess doesn't say much if we're late." The young man laughed again, a proper understanding laugh. "I see," said he. "That accounts for your being in the wood. We hid among the cliffs." "Did you have a governess then?" "Did we not? A Greek, too. She had a way of clutching her dress when she hunted us among the gorse bushes that made us laugh. Then she'd say she'd get us whipped. She never did, though, bless her. Aglaia was a thorough sportswoman for all her learning." "But what lessons did you do when you were little?" "Ancient history, the classics, arithmetic, and so on," he answered. "My sister and I were thickheads, but my two brothers, I'm the middle one, liked those things, and of course Mother was clever enough for any 6. She was nearly as tall as I am, and she looked like the new statue on the Western Road, the Demeter of the baskets, you know. And funny, Roma Dea, how Mother could make us laugh." "What at?" "Little jokes and sayings that every family has, don't you know?" "I know we have, but I didn't know other people had them too," said Una. "Tell me about all your family, please." "Good families are very much alike. Mother would sit spinning of evenings while Aglaia read in her corner, and Father did accounts, and we 4 romped among the passages. When our noise grew too loud, the pater would say, 'Less tumult, less tumult. Have you never heard of a father's right over his children? He can slay them, my loves, slay them dead, and the gods mightily approve the action.' Then Mother would prim up her mouth over the wheel and answer, 'I'm afraid there can't be much of the Roman father about you.' Then the pater would roll up his accounts and say, 'I'll show you,' and then and then he'd be worse than any of us." "Fathers can if they like," said Una, her eyes dancing. "Didn't I say all good families are very much the same?" "What did you do in summer?" said Una. "Play about like us?" "Yes, and we visited our friends. There are no wolves in Victus. We had many friends and as many ponies as we wished." "It must have been lovely," said Una. "I hope it lasted forever." "Not quite, little maid. When I was about 16 or 17, the father felt gouty and we all went to the waters." "What waters?" "At Aquae Sulis. Everyone goes there. You ought to get your father to take you some day." "But where? I don't know," said Una. The young man looked astonished for a moment. "Aquae Sulis," he repeated. "The best baths in Britain." In fact, the city of Bath. Just as good, I'm told, as Rome. All the old gluttons sit in hot water and talk scandal and politics, and the generals come through the streets with their guards behind them, and the magistrates come in their chairs with their stiff guards behind them, and you meet fortune tellers and goldsmiths and merchants and philosophers and feather sellers and ultra-Roman Britons and ultra-British Romans and tame tribesmen pretending to be civilized and Jewish lecturers and, oh, everybody interesting. We young people, of course, took no interest in politics. We had not the gout, and there are many of our age like us. We did not find life sad. But while we were enjoying ourselves without thinking, my sister met the son of a magistrate in the West, and a year afterward she was married to him. My young brother, who was always interested in plants and roots, met the first doctor of a legion from the city of the legions, and decided that he would be an army doctor. I do not think it is a profession for a well-born man, but then I'm not my brother. He went to Rome to study medicine, and now he's first doctor of a legion in Egypt, the Antinoi, I think, but I've not heard from him in some time. My eldest brother came across a Greek philosopher and told my father he intended to settle down on the estate as a farmer and philosopher. You see, the young man's eyes twinkled, the philosopher was a long-haired one. I thought philosophers were bald, said Una. Not all. She was very pretty. I don't blame him. Nothing could have suited me better than my eldest brother's doing this, for I was only too keen to join the army. I had always feared I should have to stay at home and look after the estate while my brother took this. He rapped on his great glistening shield that never seemed to be in his way. So we were well contented, we young people, and we rode back to Castellum along the wood road very quietly. But when we reached home, Aglaia, our governess, saw what had come to us. I remember her at the door, the torch over her head, watching us climb the cliff path from the boat. "Aye, aye," she said, "children you went away, man and a woman you return." Then she kissed Mother, and Mother wept. Thus our visit to the waters settled our fates for each of us, maiden. He rose to his feet and listened, leaning on his shield rim. I think that's Dan, my brother, said Una. Yes, and the fawn is with him, he replied, as Dan and Puck stumbled through the copse. We should have come sooner, Puck called, but the beauties of your native tongue, O Parsenius, have enthralled this young citizen. Parsenius looked bewildered even when Una explained. Dan said the plural of dominus was dominoes, and when Miss Blake said it wasn't, he said he supposed it was backgammon, so he had to write it out twice, for cheek, you know. Dan had climbed into Volaterrae, hot and panting. I've run nearly all the way, he gasped, and then Puck met me. How do you do, sir? I'm in good health, Parsenius answered. See, I've tried to bend the bow of Ulysses, but, he held up his thumb. I'm sorry, you must have pulled off too soon, said Dan, but Puck said you were telling Una a story. Continue, O Parsenius, said Puck, who had perched himself on a dead branch. I will be chorus. Has he puzzled you much, Una? Not a bit, except I didn't know where something was. Oh, Aquae Sulis, that's Bath, where the buns come from. Let the hero tell his own tale. Parsenius pretended to thrust his spear at Puck's legs, but Puck reached down, caught at the horsetail plume, and pulled off the tall helmet. Thanks, Jester, said Parsenius, shaking his curly dark head. That is cooler. Now hang it up for me. I was telling your sister how I joined the army, he said to Dan. Did you have to pass an exam? Dan asked eagerly. No, I went to my father and said I should like to enter the Dacian horse. I'd seen some at Aquae Sulis, but he said I had better begin service in a regular legion from Rome. Now, like many of our youngsters, I was not too fond of anything Roman. The Roman-born officers and magistrates looked down on us British-born as though we were barbarians. I told my father so. I know they do, he said, but remember, after all, we are the people of the old stock, and our duty is to the empire. To which empire? I asked. We split the eagle before I was born. What thieves' talk is that? Said my father. He hated slang. Well, sir, I said, we've seen one emperor in Rome, and I don't know how many emperors in outlying provinces have set up from time to time. Which am I to follow? Gratian, said he. At least he's a sportsman. He's all that, I said. Hasn't he turned himself into a raw beef-eating Scythian? Where did you hear of that? Said the pater. At Aquae Sulis, said I. It was perfectly true. This precious Emperor Gratian of ours had a bodyguard of fur-cloaked Scythians, and he was so crazy about them that he dressed like them. In Rome, of all places in the world. It was as bad as if my own father had painted himself blue. And we'll follow Parsenius's adventures in the Roman army next time.